Hello, welcome to Believe in the Land here on YouTube. Tony Camino there. I'm Andy Billman here. We're going to be talking about multiple subjects here as we ramp up to fall, but one that is not in particular with the city of Cleveland, but is in the bigger, I'd say, patriarch of sports is this Big Ten realignment. Obviously, it really affects the Ohio State fan, which is many of us out there, being from Ohio. It impacts a lot what's going on. I think there's a lot of long-term impact. Tony and I wrote an article that came out here on Tuesday. It kind of goes point, counterpoint, not even so much that, just thoughts about the realignment. So, Tony, I'll kick it off to you first. What is your, I mean, it's a loaded question, but what is your overall thought of this whole Washington, Oregon, and let's add in the LA schools too? Do you like it? Any negatives? Overall thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I like it. I know the bigger arguments against it is now we're going to be seeing like a little bit less meaningful regular season games because we're probably going to be seeing more than one team from each conference, like the Big Ten and the SEC. And kind of those traditions are being broken from the past of college football. But really, for the Big Ten as a brand, stretching from the East Coast to the West Coast is huge. They can be an international, or not international, but a national brand across the whole country from
Yep.
LA to Cleveland. It's get both of those climates too. And more than anything, the competition. I think it's great for the Big Ten and for Ohio State, where you look at the SEC and they have like six top 10 or six top tier programs on the schedule every single year. And so for your worst games to be against like a UCLA and then an Indiana, but then have multiple games against Michigan, Penn State, USC, I think that's great for everyone.
It gives, as Tony said, a unique opportunity. It's going to make them countrywide from coast to coast, literally. It's also given them the chance to do a lot more games. If I were the Big Ten, I'd keep adding. I would not stop. This is an arms race now. I think it's going to get to the point in college athletics in 3 or 4 years where it's almost going to be like the American League and National League back in the day of baseball, where it's the SEC and the Big Ten. I do think that's coming. I think eventually the ACC will merge with the SEC and the Big 12 will merge with the Big Ten, and it's all just a wash after that. I think that's where this is all heading. I think it's a good thing. I think there's an excellent opportunity for the Big Ten to close the gap. The SEC is a machine, and it's a really well-run league. I am a Big Ten guy because I grew up here, but I do a lot of work for the SEC, and they are good, smart people. They are on their game. Sankey, the commissioner, is a really good guy, smart guy, and on top of his game. So for people to think, can we overtake the SEC in football? I don't know about that. Could they close the gap? Yes, they can. Could there be a moments where the Big Ten's better than the SEC in future years? Absolutely, yes. And that's coming. And that's coming. And they need to close this gap. And to be able to someday have games on Thursday, Friday, Sunday. I mean, sorry, not Saturday, but Saturday. If I were Tony, the Big Ten, I would do like an NFL red zone package at some point and
Yeah.
have games on at noon, 3:30, then the special highlights, and go. And then again, a special game on Thursday, a special game on Friday. That's what I would do.
Right.
And
You
make
could even be doing those like Pac-12 at night games that they used to do because you're going to have some games in California, Washington, Oregon.
it's just going to add more. The Pac-12, it's sad. I grew up in the era where the Southwestern Conference faded, and the Pac-12 kind of faced the same thing. It was just dead. I mean, there's really nothing much else to say. Again, I would add those other schools, and I know Tony made a great point in his article, and you're right. You want Florida State and Clemson and Virginia and Carolina. There's no question. If I were the Big Ten, though, right now, Tony, I would grab any of those schools I mentioned or anything like Washington State and even Oregon State. I think it's worth it to add schools. Keep going.
Yeah, I think it definitely more schools like the Washington State is good in terms of like spreading out your games across schedule because that's just more different time zones to have games on. But I guess it depends on really how many teams they're envisioning to be in the conference eventually because if they do want to be at a capped out number, I would think they want to somewhat avoid some of those like middle tier programs and stay for the heavy hitters so that it's really like the Big Ten, but I understand the time zone, so that's why maybe a school like Utah. I know they just
Yep.
left, but that
Yep.
could be in the coming 4 or 5 years. Get Utah over. I
Colorado.
think definitely for the time zones, yeah. But if they're going to cap out how many teams they get, they should try and stick to powerhouses.
I think they've blown out their caps, but Tony's right, because that is what leagues are saying. Leagues are saying what Tony's saying. I think they blew them out. As soon as you start adding Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC and you add LA schools to the Big Ten, those rules are done. I mean, it's all about what can you grab and what. I'll end on the Buckeyes, Tony. I think this is great for the Buckeye football fan. This is an excellent opportunity. They can already recruit coast to coast anywhere in the country. This is only going to enhance that. I think it's actually going to make them better. There's only so many times. It's a bummer when they play Indiana and Rutgers and Northwestern.
Right.
It's a lot more fun to play the LA schools in Washington, Oregon. I'm sorry. It just is.
Yeah.
It's better for everybody.
Definitely is. And for those West Coast schools, good for them. They get to be playing in some more cold weather, get some experience there. And it's really just matchups that we want to see. Like, how many times have you talked about, a great OSU USC, and we have to hope they meet each other in a bowl game? Now we get those games with the Big Ten Classic games we get every year. The schedule looks a lot more exciting, and it's not like you're just waiting for that Penn State-Michigan matchup anymore.
Bingo, exactly. So that's the conference realignment. Buckeye football ramps up in about 2.5 weeks or so. So there'll be more on that. And I would stay tuned to all these arm races. And don't think the SEC is not trying to add schools too. This is a big arms race. It's only the beginning. Tony there. I'm Andy. More to come. Stay tuned always to BelieveInLand.com. Believe in the Land here on YouTube and at Official Cleveland Sports on Instagram. See ya.